Our speaker today is Olivia Yang, who is the Associate Vice President of Facility Services, and she's going to give us a brief update on your talk from December. Okay.
So long ago. Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me time here. Stacy Pearson could not join us today. She's in DC, but we've talked about what to present to you and the feedback we'd like to get from you. With me is Phil Johnson, he's also from facilities. So we came in December. We came a year ago about our deferred maintenance situation, which I really don't have to tell you about because you all live in it, and what we'd like to do about it. So what we'd like to do today is to tell you what we've done since and get some guidance from you on things that you have expertise on that we have less expertise on. So, and remember what we're trying to do is prioritize needs across the system but it is not projects. So it's almost like, tell us what your problem is so that we can figure out the university's most important problems, and then we figure out how to solve them and turn them into projects. So these are things we're going to talk about. The scoring criteria, we touched on that in December. There are programmatic needs and operational efficiency needs. So those two are represented with criteria. We're going to tell you the committee and the methodology, and we're going to give you a brief glimpse into what we collected and what the next steps are. So you might recall that we showed you the criteria as a set of trees, family trees, and we had asked for feedback. So this slide shows what we refer to as the programmatic criteria. And so you see the red is what feedback we got that we added. So from a big picture perspective, we had suggested that the programmatic needs include learning and research because that's what we do. In that category, someone proposed that in research, there should be economic development, the incubator research. So we added that as a metric. Someone correctly also pointed out that the university has 3 missions: teaching, research, and outreach, service, and engagement. So we added that as a third big criteria. And then, of course, we have the operational efficiency criteria, risk mitigation. So those of you that are in Connors or Vet Med, you know, ALAC compliance, ADA compliance. So code regulatory requirements, space optimization. We talked about how as a university, we have a lot of space, 25% too much space if you do a calculation a particular way, and it's compounded by the fact that we have 25% underfunding in O&M. So risk mitigation, space optimization, and deferred maintenance, and how that would help. So we had also asked people to help us, join us in being on the scoring panel. We didn't get anybody. Given that we spent about 12 hours, a group of 12 people, evaluating all the needs, you guys must have known something we didn't know about the time commitment to score all these needs. But in any case, it was about 12 people, all people working for Stacy, so mostly from facilities, but a few from the rest of finance and administration. The thing about it is it's the same 12, so you could say if we did something right or wrong, it was consistently the same way. And what we're here to do is to get your input to augment what we don't know. And we tried to do it on a consensus basis, so it's not everybody went off and scored and then we averaged. We all talked about it so that as we talked about it, we kind of got some consistencies in how we evaluate it. So when we sent out the needs, capital needs, we got 141 needs. We had also been collecting as we went around, talked to the different deans for the last 2 years. And so there were a few repeats. We took those out. We thought some of those were more omnibus. We pushed those into the omnibus category. And there were some that we called all campus, meaning some campuses would say, I need a new boiler. And we go, okay, we all need a new boiler somewhere throughout the system. So we put it in a boiler bucket, if you will. So of the 141, once we got through scrubbing it, we had 92 needs. And in the omnibus, there was 147 omnibus equipment needs, reflecting the fact that except for this biennium, we had not gotten any MCI money for about 3 or 4 biennia, as you all are painfully aware. So where we are today is to come to you to ask for help, advice, and guidance. So you recall we have the 3 criteria: outreach, learning, and research. So we said, are they all equally important? That's a question for all of you. And how should we implement these criteria? So for example, let's say there's a need, life science. A campus would have almost every campus had a life science need. Some of those needs were met for graduates and some were met for undergraduates. Some other need were to increase or were to benefit a student group of X versus a student group of Y, which was 10 times X. So we're thinking, does it matter, graduate, undergraduate? We think the number of students it benefits would matter. And we would, because we looked at all the learning ones together, we were able to kind of grade on the curve. What were the other problems we had? Yes, how do you define outreach? So, for example, somebody from VetMed is here. There's a interest from VetMed to have what they call community practice so that the students can kind of practice having their own vet clinic. And then you have, for example, NPR at Murrow. You have the extensions. You have 4-H. You have museums. So are those all outreach? Should they all be graded equally? That's the conundrum we had, and we thought you all would be the people to give us advice on that. So so I don't want this to sound like a pop quiz, because when I was doing pop quizzes, I didn't like them very much. So what I'd like to suggest is if you don't feel comfortable giving us feedback now, if you could please send your feedback, say, to Gail, and she can collect them and get them to us. Again, what we are looking for is some guidance from all of you about, did we weight them correctly? Are all 3 supposed to be equally weighted? Or would you say, not to pick on anyone, but would outreach be, say, 20% out of 100, learning is 40, research is 40, or vice versa, or what? Give us some guidance on what you think outreach means. Is it a service that is free, or if we do a service, regardless if it's free or not, outside the university community, that should get points? And then what about graduate, undergraduate for learning? These are the sorts of things we're grappling with. So if you could just kind of talk about what you think, if you were in charge of dispensing money, how would you do it given that we have these criteria? Does that sound reasonable? to all of you? Okay.
So are we talking about capital improvements?
Can we get a mic down here, please?
Yeah.
You keep your mic.
I didn't know if you wanted to sit closer. Oh, okay.
Are these all capital improvements that you're talking about, or are they the sort of, what was the other category you had there?
Well, you recall that we had two categories.
Right.
One was the programmatic academic.
Right.
And one had to do with the operational issues.
Okay.
Risk, space optimization, and whacking at our backlog for deferred maintenance. What we're asking, we know those things. We live those. We're asking you, because you live these, help us, give us feedback on how we should be ranking them
Okay.
in terms of importance. Now, remember, we keep...
Well, I would rank research and, or research and learning or research and teaching equally high, and I'd drop down, maybe the 40-40-20 might work.
Yes, yes. That's kind of what we were wondering because, well, first of all, we needed somebody to define exactly what does outreach look like. And so if you all, you don't have to do it today, think about, here's an example. So again, what we've run into as we evaluate the needs are if you do a outreach or service outside the university, if it's free, it's not free, does that make a difference? And the purest form, it seems to be, would be like a museum, a museum of art, for example. So that would rank high, I would imagine, for outreach. But what about extension and 4-H? And what we tried to do is we took the needs, we tried to group them into these categories so that we weren't bouncing around, so that we could kind of grade on a curve, as it were. So it would be very helpful if you could start, just give us some ideas of what you think outreach is. We kind of know what learning is, but what is research? How much of the incubator economic development aspect should be considered? Just give us some thoughts about that, because we can go on forever about risk mitigation and space and deferred maintenance. It's not equally comprehensive, our knowledge, as your knowledge is on these three.
Olivia, could I ask that maybe you put your questions in an email form that we can circulate to Faculty Senate that define these things, just
Sure.
so, not to speed you up, I'm just saying that it really does help sometimes to have what you're asking for in writing, and then we can just push it to the Faculty Senate
Yes,
listserv.
be happy to do that.
Oh,
I have questions from online.
okay. And Susan has a question too.
It makes sense. Well, we'll get to both. Yes, thank you. So I have a question from online from Andra Davis, asking if they could have some clarification on the impact of each that makes a difference in terms of how to weight. And she's curious about the criteria for weighting. Ask research and they'll say one thing, ask an educator and they'll say something else, for example.
Can you repeat the first part of the question?
Sure. They're asking for clarification on the impact of each section, thinking that it makes a difference in terms of how to weight. For example, if you ask someone who's active in research and they'll say one thing, ask an educator and they'll say another.
Sure. So the weighting is important because what we're trying to do, insofar as subjective human evaluators can produce an objective set of data, we have these three categories. They're actually the heading of a spreadsheet, and what we'll do is we'll put points. We'll go from 1 to 10 times the weight, and we'll add them all up across for a total. The top ones are the ones that we will investigate further. So that's the impact of the weighting. The importance of each criteria, depending on whether you're an educator or a researcher. I think ideally we would like you to kind of put on the university hat and say, given what we know about the strategic plan, the Drive to 25, our land grant mission, when you look at these criteria, give us some words of advice of how to grade each one. So for example, if we were doing if there was a need, in fact, I suppose the ideal is you had a need that was both research and teaching. So you're doing research, but as part of that, you have either graduate or undergraduate learning component. That's the sort of thing that ought to rank high on both categories. And again, we're talking about needs. I think it's well, let me back up. The reason we're here belaboring this is because this is the first time we're doing this. And so we don't want to just pop out with an answer. We want to be very careful about not just the answer, but how did we get to the answer? And so when all is said and done, then you can say, you got it wrong. That's great, because next time we'll try to get it even better. But that's why we're kind of belaboring on this. But does that answer your question? The online question there? Yes,
She
no?
followed up with a few more questions.
That's absolutely fine.
So there will be opportunities for submitting feedback.
It's, Susan had a
Yeah,
question
Susan
too.
has-
Mine's real quick, so I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm just wondering on time frame, when do you need feedback by? Because I'd like to share it with some colleagues that are extensively engaged with outreach and get their perspective.
Yeah, okay, so would 2 weeks be enough time?
We'll go with that.
So let's say today is the, what day is it? The 6th, thank you. How about Valentine's Day?
That's one week.
Okay,
The 20th.
20th, how about the 20th? That good? And so we will try to send you by tomorrow the specific questions, send them to Gail.
Yes.
And if you guys could, don't feel constrained, maybe we're not even asking the right questions, just give us advice. We're here to say, not our wheelhouse, your wheelhouse. What do you think? Okay? Because I can just start to wrap this up. So again, this is not talking about what gets funded, if only because, particularly given the president's direction, we want to build up the whole philanthropy. And at some point, the university's financial situation will allow us to borrow money again. And so we have to be looking at different fund sources. So what we're trying to do is to say, which need, if solved, gives us the most bang for the buck? This is a very complicated question because it's system-wide. And so you really have to start prioritizing what to do. And so the next steps, as I said, is once we get this all sorted out, we'll take it to Stacy, the provost, the president, take it to the regents in terms of where we are. At some point, it'll manifest itself in those projects that we think should be state funding items and put that in the 21-23 state capital requests. At that point, you'll start to see some of the things we talked about last time. You got your major projects, you got your minor projects. We're trying to introduce also the mini majors and other things like that. We're trying to be as creative as possible in working with the guidelines from the state to get us in the best position possible to get as much money as we can. So that's kind of where we're at.
Just to reinforce a point that you made in passing, we've been asked to comment on the strategic plan, and that is where I would assume your committee is going to go back to say, here's where the priorities of the university are. There are things that might be adjusted in the strategic plan to fit the goals of people in the faculty senate that are not concurring with what they're currently thinking about. So that comment period is important in terms of trying to get a reflection of what you want into what the university wants. And now is the time to do it, not to come back and argue later that, well, research should have gotten more priority or extension should have gotten more priority.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I do want to just temper expectations. Again, as I said, this is the first time we're doing something like this. And so it's, well, I guess it would be fair to say we're not going to make everybody happy. Maybe all we can hope for is make everybody equally unhappy with us. Maybe that's the best thing we can hope for. But yes, I think what we're trying to do is to keep looking at it so that at some point we get to a point where a reasonable number of people feel that this is consistent with where the university is going. It's consistent with the fact that we're investing these kinds of money towards those goals, and that's the right thing to do. That's what we're trying to do. We don't know that we'll get there this time. We won't get it perfect. Certainly we won't get it to where everybody's going to be happy, but we're trying to develop a process. And that's why we're not coming and fixating on, well, here's the list. We're saying, now how do we do this? How do we thoughtfully do this? And how do we do it in a way that engages as many of the faculty and the governance leadership as possible? Thank you very much.
And I see we have quorum, so we'll call the meeting to order. Approval of the, let's see, number 3, agenda, approval of the minutes of January 23rd. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda? Are there, sorry, thank you. The minutes? All right. Announcements, 3 information items, and I'm going to fold 3 into my report. So I'll try and make it brief. First off, just a reminder that the Senate election page is live, and we tried to detail the sort of scope of work of those positions. We have a executive secretary position and the chair-elect position. So please go through that. I've already talked to some of you about potentially running, as has Dave and AG and whatnot. So elections are going, and we're just as an announcement. Secondly, I sent an email to all of the faculty, as well as reinforced Gail sent it to the Faculty Senate listserv on the strategic plan. So that draft plan I attached to the email, and I'm looking for feedback, like the capital coordination of prioritization with the goals and objectives that are outlined in the strategic plan, because that seems like a really sort of important thing. So those sorts of feedback you can present either, you can go online and take the survey at strategic plan, strategicplan.wsu.edu, or you can just shoot me an email. And then I'm going to try, I think the survey closes on the 25th, and I'm going to try the weekend after next to do a data mining that Tammy has volunteered to help me with on the things, and present a formal report to the president from Senate that's public, that these are the faculty feedback that we got on the strategic plan. I would say that in what has been said to me many times is this strategic plan is not fixed, and that it will evolve over time. So just putting that out there. And then the thing I wanted to talk to you about, update you on as well, is our meeting with the president and provost on January 28th. And as you can imagine, we talked about system organization and the provost search. So in terms of system organization, I think the president and the provost, it's fair to say, understand that change has to happen. And AG and Laura are here on the committee that's at least starting to take that dive into system policy, as it were. And this was not said to be confidential, so I can say it. There is a list of potential, or there are a list of provost candidates. Some of them are internal. So I think that we're being heard in terms of the message. So Dave, do you have anything on the timeline? Like, do we have any updates on the timeline on when candidates will come to campus? Is it still in like April? Yeah, still in April. So candidates will come to campus in April, and it's going to be critical that you all engage with the provost candidates when they come. And it's just, we can't complain about the process unless we involve ourselves in the process. So I think that our voice must be heard in that. And are you still soliciting questions to ask?
Absolutely.
So Dave would like, if there are questions that you think are appropriate for these provost candidates when they're being interviewed. So the way that these things work is the provost candidates come to the airport in Seattle, and they're interviewed by the hiring committee, or the search committee, and then the search committee narrows down the candidates that come to campus for visits. So during the airport interviews, we have to ask questions, and those questions are, well, Dave, asks questions, and those questions they have to be the same for every candidate. So if you have questions that you think are appropriate that a provost candidate should be able to answer well, send those questions to Dave. Okay. And those are my remarks. Number 5, are there any additions or changes to the agenda? Hearing none. The agenda is good. Agenda items A, action items. 1, recommendation from the Academic Affairs Committee to approve the revised Rule 83, accommodations of disabilities in the classroom and administration. Exhibit D, and Casey is here to answer any questions. All in favor, please say yes.
Yes. Yes.
All opposed, please say no. It's carried. Recommendation from the graduate, this is number 2 action item, sorry. Recommendation from the Graduate Studies Committee to approve the revised graduate certificate in bioinformatics, exhibits E and E1. And Alex and Umesh are here to answer any questions. All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
All opposed, please say no. Motion carried. Action item number 3, recommendation from the Graduate Studies Committee to approve the revised plan for the MS in Statistics non-thesis exhibits F and F1.
Right? So we just. Yeah, MS in statistics. What?
Somebody's mic is not muted. Okay. So that was action item number 3. Are there any questions for Alex or Umesh? All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, please say no. Okay. Action item number 4, recommendation from the Faculty Senate Steering Committee to approve the revision to the Faculty Senate Constitution to allow the WSU Faculty Senate representative from the Honors College, exhibits G. Are there any questions? All in favor, please say yes.
Yes. Yes.
All opposed, please say no. All righty. Last action item, recommendation from the Professional Health Sciences Committee to approve the Professional Health Sciences Major Change Bulletin number 3, Exhibit H. And John, are you here? John is here to answer any questions. All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
All opposed, please say no. Okay. Discussion items. Recommendation from the Academic Affairs Committee to approve the Undergraduate Major Change Bulletin number 7. Casey is here to answer any questions. Recommendation from, this is discussion 2, recommendation from the Academic Affairs Committee to approve the Undergraduate Major Change Bulletin number 8, exhibits J. Casey is still here. Questions? And discussion item 3, recommendation from the Graduate Studies Committee to approve the Graduate Major Change Bulletin number something, exhibits K. And Alex and Umesh are here.
Do we at least know what the number is?
Do we know what the number is?
Number 4.
Number 4?
It says it on the website.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So that would be bulletin number 4, Exhibits K.
Yes.
No questions? And we move to constituent concerns. Yes, Eric?
Eric Olson from School of Biological Sciences. I had 2 constituent concerns. One, a colleague sent an email that I'd like to just read, and that is that he just received a press release from Parking and Transportation regarding rate increases. In 2004, the Board of Regents approved annual increases in parking rates that would not exceed the U.S. Department of Labor CPI index, which is about 2%. The rate changes proposed for the next fiscal year are in general about 10% or more. In addition, the statement that rates have not increased in 2016, 17, or 18 may be right, but they're certainly aware that the majority of permit holders have seen a dramatic increase in 2017, 18 by simply changing zones to get around regulations. That is, the same lot, which was yellow before, turned into a green, which raised the rate by about $150 or roughly 30%. And he wondered if this is something that Faculty Senate would be addressing.
Yes, I got that email this afternoon as well, and it surprised me. So we'll have to talk to parking services. And I'm going to completely guess here, but what is the approval process for these rate increases? I mean, they have to be approved. They can't just be dictated. Let us find out some information. But yeah, parking is a problem. Yeah. And I mean, one of the problems too is that parking affects everybody regardless of their salary, right? And it's a deep issue. And the parking would remind us that they are fully self-funded. So I will get information back to you.
The other concern is one that I wanted to bring up, but I expect might be on the minds of others as well. And that is the early decision to close campus yesterday. When they made the decision, the weather services that I was following said that Pullman was going to receive between 1 and 3 inches. And at least at my house, we got about 3 inches. The decision to close campus at 5:30 the night before, when we know that weather conditions can vary a lot on the Palouse, seems to me a major problem. And as this is supposedly the instigation of a new system that they've implemented, I think that there has to be some major questions about this new system and how it's being implemented. I think it's a little bit bizarre that WSU was closed and the Pullman School District ran on time. They didn't even have a 2-hour delay. And this is a major concern for a lot of areas, but particularly, I know that in my unit, there were major exams being given in classes of 500 plus students. Labs were canceled, which means that they're trying to make up labs, which deeply affects graduate students who are supposed to be TAing those labs. The knock-on effects of this are substantial across the university. The report that I saw about the justification for making the decision early was something to the effect that, well, there are people that commute from Spokane and they need to be given forewarning about these kinds of things. I think when you consider the number of people on the Pullman campus in relation to the number of people who commute from Spokane, that seems to be a dubious justification for making a decision as early as they did. And I think that this should be of a major concern to the Faculty Senate because it significantly impacts our operations if they are going on a regular basis to cancel campus operations at the slightest threat of a snowstorm.
This is on our agenda when we next meet because I think we all share those concerns. It's a big problem, and especially with labs. You're right, and when we have huge lecture courses and we're giving tests and trying to reschedule those, especially when we have to schedule some of those tests really far out, like almost a year for night exams. I mean, I get that. And I know that the process, and I read that too about the commuters, and I know that the process is they've constructed, I think it was 2 years ago, sort of a weather committee, and they are supposed to make the call. But it is a question of when they make the call. I agree. I mean, I've lived in this area pretty much all my life, and you're right. I mean, it's quick to change. And I remember that they did this, they started this last spring, right? They started making the call early, and in those cases, the call was the correct call because we got dumped on. But I don't know what the balance is. I don't know that they know what the balance is. But we are going to talk about it when we meet next. Can I just do one thing, Donna, please?
Sure.
I just don't want to ignore the remotes. Are there any constituent concerns from people on Zoom or at the remote location?
Greg, this is you and Umesh, College of Business. Just observation. Why is it that the dorm costs are so high for students when in fact we own the buildings? And why is it sometimes equal or higher than what private enterprise can offer? I mean, this is a question related to overheads. I mean, is that the problem?
So what I can tell you is a couple of things. One is, I would like to remind you that next Senate meeting, Stacey Pearson's going to give us a university budget update, sort of state of the budget, and that would be a good question to ask. And I could say that the other thing that housing has to do is put together tremendous amounts of reserves to replace these major projects like roof replacements. We've been told when we've asked why the housing costs are so great and why they have such a great reserve, because they have a huge reserve. But, you know, they'll spend several $1 million on replacing a roof in a dorm. So I don't know that I have the answer, Umesh, but Stacey might be the person to ask that next Senate meeting.
In terms of reserves or whatever else, I think the private enterprise has the same costs, maybe more, because they have to pay taxes and so on. So, I mean, they could give answers, but I think it's something to ponder at least, why these costs in Pullman are high.
I think that's an excellent question to ask to Stacey in the end of February, and I'll give her forewarning that that question is coming so she can help prepare. Does that sound okay?
All right.
Okay, Don, oh wait, let me get Donna, and then we'll take it in order.
Oh, if this is related, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Wait, sorry, I'm gonna have to do this.
Glenn Duncan would like to make a comment.
Oh, hi. Greg, I have two concerns that I'd like to raise. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. So you and I have had some communication via email, and one of those issues was about HR. Are you in a position to share out some things that are relevant for Faculty Senate based on your meeting with HR?
Not quite, but I can tell you that one of the concerns, so I can sort of fill in the blanks, and Glenn, please correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the issues that we face is a lot of staff turnover in our units, especially staff that support instruction and whatnot. And part of the problem is, and we have two classifications, civil service and administrative professional. And civil service salaries are dictated by the state with various steps depending on background, and AP has guidance for salary, but it is the appointing authority in the unit that decides whether or not they're going to pay them. And a lot of times it deals with retention. And so we met with a person that is in HRS that is detailing a sort of a pay. She comes from SEL and has a background in being able to calculate the quality of pay, as you were, like cost of living, experience, jobs, that sort of stuff. So what I had thought about doing, or what we had talked about doing, is asking Teresa Elliott Cheslick to speak to Senate because we have carried your concerns forward. So, but I don't have I can't wing it with some of the specifics though right now, Glenn, sorry.
Okay, I appreciate that. I really can't stress enough how problematic this is, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I'm not the only one who's had some issues with HR. It is so bloody hard to work with HR, and it shouldn't be that way, and it really can't be that way if we're going to move forward. And I have just had awful experiences with them as of late that has taken so much of my time that would be so much better spent writing grants and other things. It just, the number of questions that I get back from a job description, the issue we're talking about now with civil service and AP, I've not been able to fill an AA2 slot for 4 years. And I just outright said, I'm not doing it again. I'm not going to launch a search for an AA2 and waste my time. I want to go up to an AP. And of course, they told me no. It's just,
So,
it shouldn't be this hard. We need to do
right,
to break through here.
and what I was hoping that you would do is send a list of concerns that I could forward to, I mean, because I share your concerns, right?
So-
But I do know that that one of the things that we found out, and it is on the website, that it's the appointing authority that makes the call, and HR is not necessarily the appointing authority. There are, on the Spokane campus, it's the chancellor, and I can't remember, there's another person that's the appointing authority. And in colleges, it's typically the dean and their financial person. So the HR advises the dean and the financial person, but the appointing authority is the one that makes the decision. So I did convey these concerns to Teresa, and it would help if I don't know whether you want to share, but there are some if we could give her some specific examples, then we could dig deep into it.
So we are. I have 2 points on that. You know, what you just said, I think, is how it should work in reality, and that's what we're told how it works, but that's not how it works. I have just experienced this just happened where I was told by HR, not my dean supports me. No, you can't do that. So, I mean, I'm not real happy about people telling me what's best for my unit, what I can and can't do, because that's kind of my job as the chair, right? And I should be able to make those decisions, and the dean supports me. But on the ground reality is that HR will step in and they will say no to certain things. Related to that, we are trying to give you a data-driven list. And one of the issues we've had, and so I would request this of you since you're in communication with them, is to have them be totally transparent about all of their data. We would like to get numbers of folks who have left within a year, failed searches, all of that. And some of our folks have had a hard time obtaining that data. So I would request that HR be very transparent with that information so that we can actually dig deep and quantify some statistics that will show, you know, how bad things are in terms of loss of staff and faculty.
We're happy to work as a conduit to get you that information. I wasn't expecting in your email that it would be a, you know, one and done. I figure we can create a conduit and ask Teresa to come here, or else set up a different meeting to answer those concerns. I hear you. I share some of those concerns.
So that's my major concern. The second one was I missed a little bit about what you talked about in terms of the strategic plan. So could you repeat that? And then I have kind of a note to say about that.
So the president released email on Monday that linked to strategicplan.wsu.edu. At that site towards the bottom is the draft strategic plan and a Qualtrics survey. And the Qualtrics survey is where he asked people to comment on the strategic plan. He also asked us, when we met with him last week, with him and the provost last week, to provide a formal report from faculty, Senate, on the strategic plan. And I took that and sent the email on Monday as well with a PDF of the strategic plan. And I'm getting emails back, and I also have access to the Qualtrics data. So into next week, I'm going to start digesting the data and binning it as best I can with some help from experts. And then present a formal and public report back to the strategic plan. And I think what Mike brought up was really interesting as well, that if facility services is working on a method of optimizing or determining need, and need based on the biggest bang for our buck, doesn't that speak to a sort of a systems goal or objective? And then how does the strategic plan and the process that Stacy and Olivia are working on, how do those connect, right? So, I mean, anything that you send me will go into a formal report that will be public.
Okay, so that's what I was getting at. I just wanted to know what was going to be the next step with the information you obtained from us. And one of the concerns I have with this strategic plan, just like any other strategic plan, is that it's just that, it's a plan. And what this lacks is, to me, any real substance, any real meat. I mean, I'm reading through some of these things. We already know that we need to increase the hiring and retention of exceptional, diverse faculty and staff, right? That's kind of a given, and we've been talking about that for decades. The more important piece is, how are we going to actually do that? And that's the problem I have with this strategic plan, just like any other plan. We don't have any concrete way of actually seeing these objectives be realized.
Okay, I'll go there. Our former provost, Mitzi Montoya, recommended to leadership a book called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, which several of us have read. It is a fantastic book on strategy and in that writing strategic plans. And I share your concerns. I think a lot of us share those concerns. The position that we don't want to be in is, so we worked on a survey that was changed radically. Faculty worked on a survey that was changed radically before it went out, the all university survey. So faculty we've not had enough input in this process, I would say. And I think I'm public about that. And then the visioning conference, when we counted faculty non-administrators, we had, I think, 7 people in the room in Pullman. And I've talked to some of those people to find out why. And a couple of people came in, saw it, and left, and I hunted them down too. And I just think that we have this, that's why I sent this email out. We have this opportunity. And to the people that wrote that plan, I will say they made it very clear, as has the president, that this is the first attempt. And they are on a timeline. And while I feel the timeline may be a bit artificial, there is a timeline. So I think right now it's 23 pages or something like that. It's not huge. Look through it, send an email, I'll make a formal report, and it'll be more representative of the faculty. I don't know what's going to happen after that. I share your concerns, Glenn. I forwarded those concerns individually and in our meetings with the president and the provost.
Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it.
So please, feedback. The more voices, the more the message will matter. Donna?
Yeah, I have to say, I agree that HR has been a total nightmare, and I tried for a year to get something done, had no success, and until things blew up. And then I was told, I said, well, how could I get them to listen to me? Oh, they'll listen to you next time. But that's not good enough. But actually, my constituent concern, this has been expressed by many constituents, and as I was thinking about it, it has to do with accommodations for disabilities, but it also has to do with accommodations for reporting parties to CRCI, that we are told that this has to come out of our own department's budgets. And just as with parking, it disproportionately affects people with lower salaries, it disproportionately affects people with smaller departments, that it has to come out of their department if you want to take interim measures for, say, a reporting party to CRCI. And I think that the effect that this has is that it increases the likelihood that the department will discriminate against the reporting party or the person requesting accommodations if the budget's smaller. So why can't that be centralized rather than the burden of any individual department? So
it sounds like what if we wanted to go back to what Olivia said, when we talk about mitigation of risk, since we're
Yeah.
mandated to accommodate, that rightfully so, mandated to accommodate, I think that email with because doesn't that sound like something that might be addressed in a strategic plan on how to create resources to deal with accommodation? Because you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, you're the department chair of English. Glenn's the department chair of NEP. I mean, these things have to be managed by department chairs, and there's a lot of work to it.
Yeah,
I get that.
sure. Okay.
So but I think that if you could comment on that and send me an email,
Yeah.
because we need a pile of resources. And the other thing that we don't have, I would go further, is that recently we dealt with a faculty member in my home department, and even how to accommodate, we had no expertise on campus. So
Yeah.
we were trying to figure out, well, okay, we know we have to accommodate, but how do we best accommodate?
Yeah.
I was sent to an internet resource.
Yeah. In one case, all she needed was a chair, and we were told to fill out all this paperwork, and then it would take several weeks for them to get back to us.
And you have
So-
to buy it.
Well, I just put a chair in her room, and she was perfectly happy, but I'm not supposed to say that. Okay.
Anybody at remote location? Any other? We'll carry forward parking, because that was a surprise. We'll carry forward the weather, the adverse weather, and keep you informed as things progress, but please give us feedback. Okay, we're adjourned.